Welcome everyone. This is a Kings Beach Parking Community Meeting. And the purpose of this meeting is to gather your input on what the community parking issues are. And we're also going to provide updates on the county's progress to date. Tomorrow's meeting at noon is the same format as tonight. Just in case you were wondering, they are not separate subjects. You could attend one or the other or both if you wish. And that is also a virtual meeting at noon tomorrow. I want to acknowledge and thank everyone for the change in the format for tonight's meeting. We had really hoped to do an in-person meeting. We had it all ready to go at the North Tahoe Event Center, but due to weather, we made this decision yesterday to pivot to virtual. And I'm glad we did, and I'm glad that those of you that are here got the message and that you're able to join us tonight. I did want to state as well that we will host, our plan is to host an in-person parking meeting with the community in March. We're looking at the week of March 18th. So stay tuned for more details on that. We can go to the next slide, please. So for tonight's agenda, we will start out with introducing the presenters. And I'll go ahead and do that now and then go through the topics for tonight. But my name is Rebecca Tabor. I'm the Deputy Director for the Department of Public Works here in Tahoe. And I'm representing the county on development of this parking management program. With me, I'm very excited to say is Julie Dixon, who is our consultant with Dixon Resources Unlimited. We're excited. We've contracted with Julie and her team. They are an experienced parking consultant. They've done projects locally as well as nationwide. So I'll be taking the first part of tonight's presentation, and then I'll be handing it over to Julie. So what I'll be talking about is really an overview of the North Lake Tahoe Parking Management Program. Some elements of parking management. What is it, right? So I'll cover some of that. And then progress we have made over the past year to really make things better as far as parking in North Lake Tahoe. Julie's portion of tonight is really going to be one of the larger portions of our discussion. It's an interactive exercise, and it's called the Parking Magic Wand. Next slide, please. So again, what we're working on is a phase 1 implementation plan for the North Lake Tahoe Parking Management Program. Next slide, please. Many, many years have gone into planning in this region for environmental improvements. The Tourism Master Plan, TART, our regional transit system, TRPA's Regional Transportation Plan. These many years of important planning efforts culminated with our Placer County Board of Supervisors adopting the Resort Triangle Transportation Plan in 2020. And this aims to meet the environmental goals of the region. Next slide, please. The Resort Triangle Transportation Plan really has these 4 main elements. Transit priority along key corridors, which are State Route 89 and 267, managing parking, microtransit, and encouraging commute choices. So fewer vehicle trips will help improve the environmental quality for the area. And I think you've heard, and it's really coming from TRPA and Placer County, is we want to see people get out of their cars, and we want to see more walkable, pedestrian-friendly town centers. We also want to make more efficient use of our existing infrastructure. We don't want to expand and widen our roads and build more parking lots. We want to optimize use of what we have, roads and parking resources. Next slide, please. So parking program goals are there's several. we want to encourage alternative travel modes, ensure adequate parking and turnover for our businesses, prevent spillover parking that we see in the peak summer and winter demand periods into neighborhoods. We want to solve parking related issues and provide efficient use of available parking and land. And also, if surplus revenues are available, we want to put those back into the local community for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit enhancements. Next slide, please. So this past year, we really kicked off around the May timeframe, but even before that, some different public outreach steps we've taken. We did a field walk with the NTBA's Economic Vitality Committee, the EVC. That was in April, and we walked around Kings Beach, and this group is a very important community group to the county. We value the relationship we have. They pointed out several things that we've listened and we've followed up on, and I'll get to that. But that was in April. We did a presentation to the TNT, Transportation Management Agency in May. And then we did some community workshops in Kings Beach and Tahoe City, May and June. And those were in person. And then we also did a virtual community workshop in July. Between July and October, we had several opportunities and engagement with committees under the NTCA as part of the 3-year sponsorship funding program. And the members of these different committees listed here, they're really local community members, and they had some great feedback about our development of our parking management program. So we were successful in obtaining the funding, and we also adapted the direction of the parking management program as a result of these meetings. Next slide, please. As part of the July virtual workshop, we did a parking survey. I just have one of these results slides to share here. Where do you think the biggest parking problems are? So the top two are downtown Kings Beach, the yellow bar there, and then summer recreation kind of hit the 1 and 2 mark. These are the areas we're looking at for phase 1 development of an implementation plan. Next slide, please. So Kings Beach, these couple of graphics are really right out of the Resort Triangle Transportation Plan. And they provided an initial starting point for our conversations. These were developed as part of the parking analysis and recommendations in the RTTP. We knew we needed to go further here and build on the details, and that's all about what we're doing tonight and why we have Dixon on board to assist with development of our phase 1 plan. On the pie chart there, the existing parking supply, I wanted to point out that half, the blue side of the circle, half of the available parking in Kings Beach is private. So that's businesses or commercial, privately held parking spaces. It is so important for us in development of this program that we find private public partnerships to be able to make this program work and to be able to use some of these parking resources in the overall plan. Next slide, please. So parking management elements can include the following. I'm not necessarily saying that they will include all of these, but what is parking management? So to answer that, these are some of the elements that could be included. Paid parking in the commercial town center, summer recreational sites as well, winter recreational parking management, residential permit parking areas. And then, as I alluded to in the last slide, private business parking lot participation, voluntary partnerships to have some of those parking resources entered into the overall public parking program. Employee parking solutions, we've heard that that is a big issue to discuss, and we want to discuss that further and look for solutions. Enhance transit, and then promote alternative modes of transportation. Next slide, please. So this past year in 2023, we were successful in obtaining the 3-year funding through the NTCA. You'll see that kind of badge in the right-hand corner, your TOT, TBID dollars at work. We're very excited that we were able to find funding for the program. And then at our spring meetings, we listened, and one of the things that was recommended was that we contract with a parking consultant. And happy to say we're here. We have Dixon on board, so we've done that, and we're looking forward to this journey together. And then, as far as our parking ordinance, we strengthened parking enforcement in our existing county parking ordinance. One of the things we did was the private parking lot enforcement by county agreement. This change to our ordinance allows the county to enforce parking restrictions on private property by written agreement. And that's very key. We also increased parking fine amounts, and we increased our parking enforcement officers. We now have 2 in public works and 5 in code enforcement. And then we added a violation for parking on public sidewalks. That image shows a car partially on the sidewalk. This is something we heard from our EVC group during our field walk in Kings Beach. It happens a lot. People park up on the sidewalk, which blocks public or pedestrian access, and there really wasn't any enforcement. So we do now have a provision where there's a restriction and you can't park a portion or all of your vehicle on the sidewalk, and there's a parking fine for that. Next slide, please. So this is the parking fine schedule that our board approved, and it went into effect on November 30th. Just a lot of detail here, but just to kind of overview what you're looking at. The type of parking violation is in the second column, and there's a column just to the right that says previous. So previously, we had 7 types of parking violations that had a fine. The update that our board approved is the 3 columns on the right, the fine amounts, kind of color-coded. But what we've created here is a first, second, third, and subsequent parking fine amount. So that escalates. It's an escalating fine amount for repeat violations of the same parking restriction. And there are now 16 types of parking restrictions that have fine amounts. So we hadn't revisited for at least 2 decades and done an update to our parking fine amount. So this was a very important update and timely. And we appreciate our board's support on supporting this recommendation. Next slide, please. Another parking ordinance update we did is we added some more parking restrictions in the phase 1 area. And these are showing you, depicting no parking anytime in the red marks on National Avenue. We used to have no parking bike lane, but now it is no parking anytime along both sides of National for about a quarter mile there. And that's on the left side of your screen in Tahoe Vista. There's also a segment there on Highway 28 across from Moon Dune Beach that is no parking anytime now. It's a dirt shoulder where people were parking. And then on the Kings Beach map to the right, generally the ones you're seeing there are no parking restrictions we're placing in front of our water quality basins that have dirt shoulders where people were parking. Next slide, please. Okay, and then to briefly touch on our scope with Dixon, our consultant, project management is task one. Task two is to develop a shared parking agreement template, which will be very important with our phase one program. Task three is the main task, develop a phase one parking implementation plan. So there'll be a draft, there'll be community input and sharing that draft in the elements of that in the March timeframe, and then continuing to develop that this year. And then we also have a task to look at a mobility hub visioning, really preliminary design concepts for what we call the Swiss Mart property. It's about 3/10 of an acre on the east side of Kings Beach, and it's county owned, couple of parcels, and we've got ideas, and we want to help. We want to have Dixon help us look at bike share program or transit enhancements, ways to utilize that property to really help go along with the parking management program and work together with it. Next slide, please. And then I've been talking about the phase one area, so hopefully this will answer that question if you've been wondering what that means. Between Tahoe Vista and State Line is really that area that we are looking at for phase one. So roughly from National to Speedboat Beach and that area. So for the next portion of our presentation, Julie Dixon will facilitate that, and I'll hand it over to Julie. I don't think are you having trouble with your audio? Can you unmute, Julie? The host needs to unmute me. Jen, are you able to?
There we go. Apologies for that. I thought we tested everything, but there you go. Well, thank you everybody for being here tonight. It's evident by the number of participants that we have in this meeting that this is a very important topic, and understandably. And so tonight we just wanted to lay down some of the kind of baseline, what I'll call parking theory. And I know that not everyone here is a parking geek like me, but the one thing I think that's important is that if you drive a car, you're a parking expert. And that's something that we'll definitely like to talk about today. But the presentation that I have is very brief because we actually really want to spend today's conversation hearing from you. And I know that there's quite a few of us here today. And I also wanted to offer that our colleagues are also monitoring the chat. So if anybody wanted to take advantage of the chat, do please not hesitate to do that. And just during the presentation, we'll get through these couple of slides, and then again, we'll focus on you. So Jennifer, if you can go to the next slide, please, that would be great. So just a little bit about Dixon. So as Rebecca mentioned, parking and transportation consultants, we work all across the country. But one of the things I'd like to share is that we actually have a lot of experience working in what I'll call mountain resort popular towns like yourselves, and being able to look at, areas where we have really limited resources. The fact that you're surrounded by the water on one side and the mountains and the trees on the other, there's really not a lot of places to go. And so when we talk about where to put all these cars, because everybody wants to visit the Kings Beach area, it's something we definitely want to tackle. And as Rebecca mentioned, we've actually worked not only in Truckee, but also South Lake, and also some projects with the Tahoe Transportation District, and also in Reno as well. And so we won't claim to be experts in Kings Beach. That's why all of you are here. But the one thing we can bring is a very holistic approach towards how we can try to solve for the parking management needs. And as Jennifer goes to the next slide, one of the things that I always like to share with the community is the fact that we didn't get to where we are overnight, and being able to fix the needs and address the needs, it won't happen overnight. And so I'm sure you all can appreciate the fact that as technology has evolved and more people find out about your amazing community, the more people that want to visit that area. And the reality is we need to figure out what kind of changes we can make, and make those incrementally, because there's also an investment in technology and an infrastructure that's required. And those things obviously do cost money. And so we also want to make sure that we can test and vet those opportunities as we go throughout this process. So this is one of the reasons why we're starting here today with all of you. And I know that this is a decades old plus conversation. We recognize that. And many of you have been sharing your input over the years. And so I'll just ask that you'll be patient with us tonight and let us hear firsthand what some of your feedback is, because again, we want to make sure that we're looking at this comprehensively, because there are some immediate opportunities for some low-hanging fruit things that we know that we can do. Rebecca already outlined some of the initiatives that have already taken place, and now we can really talk about the deployment and opportunity for how to manage those moving forward, not only for the immediate and interim term, but also for the long term. Because one of the things that we know is it's about quality of life for all of you. And that's something that is obviously at the top of the priority list there. And especially when we talk about the environmental impacts and all of those factors. And if we can get into the alternatives of transportation, like transit and buses, those are all things that we want to tie into there, and bicycles as well. So talking about the roadmap, some of the groundwork has already been done, and we're actually really excited about that. What some of you maybe followed along with what Rebecca was sharing is the opportunity to establish these public-private agreements is something that is actually becoming a real big innovation across the country, where we can actually leverage private property locations and allow the county to enforce at those locations. This is something that's becoming more and more commonplace across the country, because you're actually able to leverage existing parking assets and actually help to manage those. And that's something that, especially where we have limited resources, this is something that's going to be quite advantageous. And so having an existing template agreement to be able to work with you as private property owners that want to leverage your locations, it's something that we can definitely get in the semantics of how that works. But the opportunity also for the potential of even revenue generation or revenue shares, that's also something that's worked really well in other communities. But one of the things that we talk about parking and the deployment of potential solutions or policies, we really need to be cognizant of the end user experience. We like to use the tagline that parking needs to be easy, convenient, and accessible. That also means equitable, and that also means that it applies to you as well as locals and community members and business owners and employees. But one of the things we like to talk about, especially when we talk about the parking roadmap, is the fact that when we talk about the commercial core, where your business is, where your restaurants are, being able to ensure that we can turn over those spaces so that you yourself as community members can visit the shops and the restaurants no matter what time of year it is. And that actually comes as a result of some of the resources that have already been authorized and maybe need to even be further expanded when it comes to parking enforcement, or as I like to call, parking compliance, because ideally everybody would follow the rules. When we really talk about the game plan and some of the groundwork that's already been done, some of you may have been surprised to see the tiered parking enforcement penalties. That's actually a very big win for a community like yours, because the reality is we can leverage through education and being able to use warning notices when we launch the program. But to be able to have that escalating penalty schedule is something that also helps really inform and educate the general public. I like to use the example of when the seatbelt laws came into play. We might all remember when that first started, the fact that we had that first, second, and third tier violations. And I'm sure there's some people on the call here today that can't believe that seatbelts weren't a law in the past. But the reality is, when you do try to change the policies, you have to take things incrementally. And I especially like to talk about parking. I describe parking as a learned behavior. And in order for you to be able to change that behavior, it has to come through education and information. And everything that basically we're looking to do, especially in Kings Beach, is something that will be incremental and gradual. And I know that in a lot of cases, we'd prefer to just rip the Band-Aid off and do a cannonball, into the lake and make this happen. But we also want to make sure that we're designing a sustainable solution that's also welcoming and accommodating for everyone, whether they be a local, a resident, a visitor, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that this works for everyone and make sure that we provide access. And that's something that'll also be relevant when we talk about the data. We want to make sure that as we're making policy changes, that we can measure the impact, evaluate before you basically kind of rip the Band-Aid off and do everything. Because as Jennifer goes to the next slide, one of the things that we want to make sure is that we are actually looking at a sustainable long-term solution and plan, because the challenge with Band-Aid solutions is if you push the problem, you start to enforce one area or go hard, you just push the issue to another part of the community. And that's something that we really want to be mindful of, especially as it relates to your residents, is that we don't want to just push the problem further up the mountain, for that matter, or further up the road. We want to make sure that we're looking at this holistically, because we don't want to just push the problem from one side of town to the other. And we really want to get to the point that we have the proper resources to be proactive. And that's another reason why we're so excited about the potential of being able to leverage the public-private parking agreements, because that's something, again, waving a magic wand and being able to build a parking garage, where would you put it? That's the reality of when we talk about this area. And then also when we think about the environmental impacts and factors like that. Not to say that it's totally ruled out, but I also want to be a realist here when we talk about, what the solutions that are going to work for Kings Beach. And as we go to the next slide, this is why this conversation here today is so important, is we really want to get to the root of the issue and really address the problem that we really are incurring, so that we can leverage data and we can also focus on compliance-based solutions. Because the one thing I like to share is it shouldn't be all about writing parking tickets. Sometimes it does come down to that, but ultimately, if we do our jobs right, it's all about education and information and making it easy for people to follow the rules, whether it be through signage or wayfinding to direct people to where they can park, especially for the long term. That's something that we want to tie into this overall solution. And Jennifer, if you can go to the next slide. So we wanted to give you just a brief overview of the project. And again, this is really our first round of community meetings. And I really want to highlight what Rebecca said earlier. We have the same meeting format tomorrow, and you are welcome to attend every single meeting if you so like. I just want to reiterate the fact that it's the exact same content that we're going to be talking about. It's really the community feedback that I think obviously can vary, and you're welcome to attend all of the meetings. And in fact, we encourage you to be sure to stay engaged throughout this entire process. When we come back in March, that's actually when we're going to be sharing the outcomes and the results of this first round of stakeholder engagement. And between now and then, we'll be working on several efforts, leveraging the implementation plan, including the shared parking agreements, and also working on some financial projections, because one of the potential options could include additional parking enforcement resources. It could include the potential of paid parking. There's a lot of factors that we have to tie into that, but we also want to be sure that we're doing the financial justifications associated with that. And so the intention on the next round will be to be able to talk through that feedback and then take the feedback and critique back into the plan and incorporate it. And then ultimately heading to the County Board of Supervisors sometime in fall or summer. Again, a lot of it depends on the feedback and the support generated as we have these conversations, with an implementation plan of to be determined. Now, is there potential for some potential pilots, some potential exercises that we might be able to evaluate different opportunities? These are all things that will really play out based on the feedback that we hear from all of you and the level of interest and support when it comes to different concepts and ideas. But ultimately, the one thing I really want to highlight is that we've got some really good baseline policies already in play, and the fact that we'll be able to really hone in on those and really leveraging opportunities and anything that we can do to have an immediate impact is something that we'll really jump on as we hear your feedback throughout this process. And if we'll go to the next slide, Jennifer, we really want to get into what we're really here to hear from you about. Is we like to bring a parking magic wand to all of our meetings and ask you if you could change, fix, or improve anything about parking in Kings Beach. What would you use it for? And we're going to figure out a way to do this to hopefully get everyone to interact. But before I do that, I'm going to ask Jennifer to go to the next slide, only so that we can take the slide deck off the screen. We wanted to make sure that before we close the slide deck, that you have your feedback contact information to provide us. We'll also put this in the chat box. you can respond post-meeting with any questions or comments. We have a project email, and it's pc@dixonresourcesunlimited.com. And as I mentioned, when we come back, we'll be presenting the draft recommendations for your feedback and obviously the county's feedback as well. And so with that, Jennifer, if you'll take us off shared screen, and then that way we can hopefully see everyone. My hope is that we can start with raising our hands for those that are most eager to get started. We wanted to be sure everyone had some time to chat, so we were going to ask if we could limit comments to approximately 2 minutes. I won't put a buzzer on anybody, but I will ask that if it's okay, we'll leave time at the end so that anybody who has more to share, that they have that opportunity. But that way we can really get through the group. Right now we've got 62 people gathered here today. And what we'd love to hear is that, again, if you had that parking magic wand, what you would use to change, fix, or improve about parking in Kings Beach. And there's only one thing that I will ask, is that not everyone may have the same opinion as you when it comes to the magic wand. And I just ask that everyone give the opportunity for everyone to share their feedback, whether you agree with it or not. The matter here in this project is really to look at a holistic solution so that we can find something that's the right balance for everyone. And we really look forward to hearing from everybody on their feedback. And so if you could raise your hand, we'll be able to unmute you and work with you on that coordination. And so if anybody would like to go first, I see Ann Nichols, your hand is up. And so I'm gonna see, I don't think I have admin rights. So Jennifer, looks like you're gonna be the one to unmute folks and lower their hands.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ann, go ahead.
Thanks, yeah. So you guys are located in San Diego?
So I'm located in San Diego. We actually have our team members that are on the phone who I should have introduced. My colleague Jennifer is actually located in the Bay Area, and my colleague Chisa is here today, and she's actually located in the Los Angeles area.
Can you give any examples of recreational areas similar to ours that you've done this before? You don't have to answer now, but
No, I'm happy to do that. Park City,
okay.
Utah is probably one of the largest projects that we worked with. Park City was one of the biggest. Whitefish, Montana. We've worked in Truckee, South Lake Tahoe.
Did you actually do create their parking project? Did you do Truckees?
In Truckees, they had already launched their paid parking program, and we actually came into Truckee and developed the parking action plan. And then upon the implementation process is when the pandemic happened. And actually just earlier today, we were on the phone with Truckee, and it does look like they're looking to leverage our support to help them implement the parking action plan recommendations. But that is something, a published report that was accepted, and they've initiated a few of the items, but the pandemic hit and put a pause on it. And now they're looking to relaunch that. But Park City, Utah and Whitefish, Montana were both locations that actually deployed and initiated the parking action plan.
Which was like in the last couple of years, or like
So the work in Park City, Utah,
2021.
Well, the work in Park City, Utah launched in about 2017 and basically was implemented over the next several years. And that program is still live and operational today. And Whitefish, that parking action plan was launched in about 2019. And then obviously the pandemic had an impact on a program like that one as well.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sure. And Anne, would you mind to tell us, if you had a parking magic wand, what you would use it for Kings Beach?
Well, the first thing I think that hasn't been done is, what is the problem? And is there going to be a study done about how many people are visiting the state beach in peak periods? How many people are there? What are we really dealing with? Are we dealing with, is it an enforcement problem? Can it even be handled? Is there really even a solution? I just want to figure out what is the problem that I've heard things about, oh, not enough economic vitality. But I know in Kona, they just did this paid parking on private lots. and it has ruined businesses for the locals. So I'm worried about that.
No, I appreciate that feedback. And I think that would be another good example for you too, just in terms of experience. We've actually been working with the county of Maui for the last 8 years. And in fact, the fires in Lahaina were a major setback because they were just about to launch their parking management solution. And obviously the fires have transitioned that. But I appreciate that I've actually been following the program in Kona as well. So I appreciate that feedback today. And thank you for joining us today, Anne. And honestly, if you have any other questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm going to ask Jennifer if you could please give me administrative credentials. That would really help so that I could help manage the hands raised. So as we're doing that, I see Shauna with your hand up, and I'm hoping that I soon have administrative credentials that we will be able to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi.
No, there you go. Go ahead, Shauna.
Thank you for putting this presentation together. My magic wand just is from a personal area. I live in Lower Tahoe Vista, right by Moon Dunes. And so I would love to be able to ride my bike with my family safely into town. Or to go up 267, but I know there's a bike lane, but people drive so crazy right there. It's just, and there's a merge, the highway merges there, or the two lanes merge. So that would be my magic wand, would be to get my family to town on a bike or walk.
No, I love that. And Shauna, one other question for you is, let's assume you could safely get your family on bike to town. What about bike parking and bike storage? Any thoughts or feedback about that?
I never thought about it, but of course that would be really nice.
Okay, I'm putting that on the list then. Thank you so much, Shauna. We appreciate your feedback today. And I see, is it Leah? Leah, I'm gonna find you here on the list here. Bear with me 1 second. We have quite a few participants here. Is it Leah Kaufman? Oh no, it's the next one down. Sorry, let me see here. Okay, I'm gonna see if you can unmute yourselves.
Hi there.
There you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for putting this on and taking our feedback. So I'm Sky, she's Leah. We own Lake Tahoe Photo Gallery. So we are in the building with Jason's and Adrift. So we are one of the 3 businesses that are actually on the state beach, at the state beach. And we both do work for Jason's and are close with Adrift too. So I think we have a pretty good feel for our little spot there. For us, there are 2 real key issues. And I would say for our business specifically, parking is our biggest problem. It is the biggest deterrent towards our business. And so winter and summer are 2 totally different animals, totally different crowds, totally different things happening, you know. In winter, there's really is plenty of parking because we don't get the crowds in the winter. The problem is, you know, they do a good job clearing the sidewalks and they do a good job clearing the street, but the snow doesn't get cleared between the sidewalk and the street. So the parking there is very difficult. People are parking in anywhere from 6 inches to 2.5 feet of fresh snow or, you know, ice or whatever it is. And it's dangerous, it's difficult. A lot of people can't do it. They don't have the vehicles to do it. So that's our biggest problem in the winter. So, you know, having that plowed consistently would be a huge, would take a huge step. That would be the magic wand towards the winter parking problem. And that is for every business in Kings Beach. That is true. But we are part of the North Tahoe Arts Center that's down on the east side of town. And they have the exact same problem. I know, you know, Panchitas across the street, everyone deals with this. So getting them to plow that area more consistently would help a ton. So in the summer, it's just, we're just overrun with the beach crowd. And this is most of this is a non-local crowd. You know, people will park in front of our store for 6 hours and not move their car, having fun at the beach all day. And, you know, so enforcing the 2-hour limit would help. That turns that parking over. I mean, maybe someone else just parks there and goes to the beach also, but at least it would turn over. So those are kind of two of the biggest things that we face. Our customer base lots of times is second homeowners, people that are from out of town. They don't necessarily know about the public lots. They aren't willing to walk from them. If they do make a significant purchase from us, it's not something that they can carry or that we would have time to deliver to their car if they're parked to the public lot. So, turning that parking over would be a huge benefit to us.
Okay, can I ask one question too? Oh, go ahead.
One thing is the public transit would be fantastic to make that a better program. People going to the beach aren't going to take it. They want their coolers, they want their umbrellas. They're on vacation, they're going to bring their trucks and cars. But
you mentioned a couple things too about the parking lots, and I'm wondering if in terms of improved signage, I hear you on the certain folks that just want to park as close as possible to the beach, understandably. But do you think that if with improved signage so that folks knew where the parking lots were, do you think that's something that could help in terms of encouraging folks to park in those locations?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. The other issue is just pure volume.
Yeah.
We buy the pass for the park, the yearly pass there. We don't get to use it July and August.
Right.
That lot is full by 9 a.m., 10 a.m.,
Right.
and that's midweek, weekends, whatever.
They're not leaving.
And the public lots are full also.
Yep.
So, there just doesn't seem to be enough parking in the summer.
And it's a problem at the restaurant too. The staff really struggles to find parking because the earlier shifts figure it out, but the afternoon people are out of luck a lot of the time. It'll take them an hour to figure out somewhere to safely put their car.
Just to get to work. And then
Yeah,
I was
you
wondering,
you can't, if you're parked on the street, you can't move it in the middle of your shift. So the 2-hour parking, does need to be enforced, but also figuring out a solution for employees is really key.
Ellie, I wanted to ask you one question about that, and I promise we'll move on. I see other hands. When it comes to the 2-hour time limit, assuming it was consistently enforced, let's, using that magic wand, let's assume it's consistently enforced. Is 2 hours, in your experience as a business owner, is 2 hours enough? Is it too much? I'm just wondering for, a person to be able to come and comfortably shop or dine, is the 2 hours the sweet spot right now, or should it be less or more? Do you have any opinion of that?
I think 2 hours is pretty good. It allows people enough time to, have a pretty casual meal, even if there's a wait, they can still kind of shop or go down to the beach. And if they, if they want to stay longer, they'll move their car.
Right. No, I appreciate that.
I do think less than 2 hours would be tough for people.
Yeah, like an hour or an hour and a half.
So
would
2 hours
probably be bad.
is pretty good. I mean, I think that's, I don't think you could restrict it more than that.
The one other one, and then I promise I'll move on, but I think that this will help address probably some other folks' thoughts. If having a short-term parking space is very common now in a lot of communities where by block face, kind of by area, having a short-term space, maybe a 15-minute or 20-minute, use the example of being able to load your car from a purchase that you made, or maybe running in to pick up your coffee or whatever the case may be. Do you think that that would serve your area well?
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
Right.
And people would use it to drop off their stuff for the beach, but that's a consideration as well, because the restaurant has people blocking in their customers to unload their coolers and umbrellas. Can I make one quick point?
Sure.
As business owners, we would be in favor of any program that could potentially work with the state parking lot that would validate parking, or cover a parking fee. If somebody makes a purchase from us, we would happily refund them their $10 or whatever they spent on parking.
Great. I love it. And you're already 10 steps ahead in the respect of opportunities of ways to efficiently manage parking, and parking validation, especially in the congested areas like yours, is one that is definitely an advantage, especially during the summer. And I do think that there's some opportunities And the key really comes back to what was said earlier about consistent enforcement and making sure that the expectation that someone's going to come and check on me. I will tell you that in more than one location, we've done pickup drop-off zones, especially in the beach area, so that people can be able to unload, drop off the family, and then take their car to the longer term location. So that's something we'll definitely look at, especially with the state park. So I know
Sounds
I've
good.
got other hands, so thank you all very much for
Thanks for your time.
participating. Yeah, thank you. And then I see Andrew, if you wouldn't mind to go ahead and unmute yourself.
There we go. Hello, everybody.
Whoa.
So if I had a parking magic wand, I think you have to kind of look at our current business model that's happening downtown, which is, every summer period we've got folks that come for the recreation because of our gorgeous state beach, and they come with loaded coolers and full gas tanks, and they park on a sidewalk for free, enjoy a lovely beach for free, and leave their trash on the way out. And if you look at our sales tax revenues since kind of 2008, we're more or less flat. We're not kind of growing to keep up with the demands of inflation. And as a town, you can also look around and look at our buildings and see they're dilapidated. So if I could wave that wand, we'd kind of find a way to maybe control the peak of that influx we get, because it is all rec-based parking, and that's impacting our businesses, like we just heard from Sky, is that the folks that are going to the beach are parking in the available business spots, and that's impacting the business. So if we could find a way to maybe get the rec users to pay a portion or pay some of their fair share for the trash and infrastructure costs, I think that'd be really great. And if we could make parking available to our businesses so that if someone wants to run down and visit a shop, they know there's going to be a nearby parking spot. I think that would be really great. In terms of the renewal for Kings Beach, we're a small lot community, meaning all our original lots are rather small. So as an engineer in town here, I can't tell you the time since 2002 we have bumped into it with a really good idea of a project that's a renewal of an existing building. It's not a tear down and build something else, but just a renewal, and that has been tripped up by parking requirements that were not existent when this subdivision was laid out. So if we could find a way to allow some more investment in our town on a small scale, that would be great, because when we get small scale owners and people that live here that own their business, we get stewards. And when we get stewards, we get people that care about Kings Beach. And I think the kind of anxiety I feel every summer is that it feels like our town is really busy with a lot of people that maybe don't care so much about Kings Beach, or haven't learned to care about it like we do. So yeah, that'd be my magic wand. Figure out a way to get them to help bear some of the costs, keep our access to business, and then allow our businesses and older buildings to reinvent themselves to create more stewards in town.
And Andrew, I'd love to take note and I'll follow up with you. I'd love to talk to you a bit more about some of these renewal concepts. As you know, and many might not know, there's a lot of parking requirement changes in California through the state legislation over the last several years. And that's something too that we could definitely talk about, maybe how those impacts and changes could have an effect. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and we appreciate your feedback. And so next I see Jessica, if you wouldn't mind to unmute yourself, and hopefully I didn't screw that up. I might have, hold on a second. There we go, Jessica. Can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Thank you all for having this forum. And I guess I have kind of a scenario of who I am and what my lifestyle is here in Tahoe, more than perhaps a solid question. I purchased my home actually 24 years ago from Ann Nichols. So it's kind of fun to see Ann Nichols on here. And what's happened to me is being a lifer here in North Lake Tahoe. I've owned a small business for 17 years in Inclines. And then I own a home in Placer County. So during COVID, I closed my business and moved my business here to my location, separate entity, like two separate buildings. And then I've also done short-term rental to save my existence during COVID. What my problem is with parking is Placer County has been very diligent in doing lots of things for us with the short-term rentals. For example, all of our code restrictions, all of our up-to-date things, but all of the homes around me are so if you know my street, it's Park Lane. I'm across the street, really close to Speedboat Beach. So we get a lot of overflow parking from Speedboat Beach that comes up here. And then if you know my street, it's very steep. It does a loop and then it hits back to the highway. From my house near the highway, there's 4 homes and they're all low income homes. They house about, they should house about 4 people, like 2 couples, but they pack in and then they have parking all, and it's problematic. They also have a lot of parties constantly. And so they're bringing up people from like the Bay Area. They're younger, they're probably in their 30s. So when COVID happened, the Crystal Bay Club, for an example, wasn't open, and they thought that they became the Crystal Bay Club. We've had a death at the house across the street. There's constant police, but I'm doing Placer County's job. I'm constantly watching for the parking, everything else, but it's hindered my businesses because they come and park in my space. Then on a separate note, when I need to go out into town, I'm way over here near the California-Nevada state line. And whenever I've had to do my errands, like go to Safeway, normally it takes me 3 minutes to go to Safeway. During the summertime, 45 minutes just to get across town. I know how many STR taxes that I've paid into the Placer County. I've paid over $100,000 into TOT taxes. Why in the world do we not have like a pedestrian overpass, like over by the Hyatt and Incline? So our pedestrians can get off the road, park somewhere else, bus in or not, and then give us locals access to our own things. Again, I'm a lifer here, and I'm getting so frustrated from having all tourism and everybody else making money off of the tourism. Come to Lake Tahoe, come to Lake Tahoe. Here's another interesting concept that I've been kind of looking into. When I say welcome to my place, clean up after yourselves, clean up after other humans. When you park at places, back to the trash when we have these beautiful, beach spots. I was doing some research to say, welcome to Tahoe. This is how many people visit us annually. I'm really glad that I looked up the number, because when I was younger, I had a different number in my head. But what's crazy is I was different topic, totally different subject. I was watching a program that was doing science, and they were talking about a number. In the ancient Roman days, there was 20 million people, scientists believe, that walked on all of Earth. So that would be the ancient Romans and people that didn't even meet each other yet, like the Mayan Incas. Currently, we have 20 million people that visit Lake Tahoe annually. How's Lake Tahoe going to sustain that? It's the most beautiful, freshest water in the USA, and we just monopolize it. It's awful. I see so much construction everywhere, and they park the big, huge rigs, and there's just oil or gas that's leaking out of those things that's filtering. And we do our BMPs and stuff, but I don't really see that this growth is really working. So back to the Kona thing. I have family in Kona, and I really recognize also the way they do their tourism, and we're not on page with things like that. Also, let's look at Yellowstone. Yellowstone only allows a certain amount of cars into their national park at all. So what we should do is have stops at some place like the bottom of 267, the entrance of 89, over here, 28 at Incline. And if you don't have a pass in your car that shows that you're a legitimate resident, pay your taxes. And I'm not talking extra parking passes for so maybe whoever's in your home and whoever's claiming the, I can't think of what the terminology is right now, but when the consensus, whoever signs up for the consensus. But, we're not giving passes out now, let's say, to your spouse and then the college kids and then their family and you don't get 10 passes for your home. You get however many passes, you sign up on the consensus. And so only I feel that the real people that actually live and work here should be driving around Lake Tahoe.
So Jessica, you raised a couple of really good points, and some of them I have to tell you, when we talk about the future of transportation just in California as a whole, one of the things that you're describing is something that they've done in many European cities, and it's basically tolling. And so one of the things that has to happen is from a state level, that's the kind of thing from a conversation, but this is where that conversation starts. And so I will tell you, having worked on the South Shore, this is a conversation that has been, I'll just say, thematic across the board. And I'm not displaying anything that you said, but I do want to say that being able to incorporate that into a more global conversation, because this is definitely something that is more holistic from a California level because of all of the entities that are involved. But I'm definitely taking note of it, because I just want you to know this is not the first time that I've absolutely heard that concept. But the one thing that I think I can suggest as a more immediate, when we talk about recommendations, and this kind of goes into the challenge of what you were talking about the neighboring houses and kind of the over population and the utilization of cars. One of the things that this project could result in is a permit parking program, especially when you talk about the residential neighborhoods around the commercial core, around the recreational areas. Now, one of the things I want to be very transparent about is that residential parking passes are amazing when you talk about the impacts that you're talking about, but there are some inconveniences that come along with those. But I think for most communities, the inconveniences outweigh the benefits, in the respect of they'd rather deal with the hindrances of managing a permit parking program so that you can actually have that access. So I do
That's
think
the whole
that
reason why I live here, is to be in
Yeah.
a gem. I don't live here to have San Francisco be in my backyard.
Understandable. And I think that, so some of the things that you highlighted, I think that there's some ways that we can definitely incorporate the solutioning into it so that you do have that access and you do have a parking space near your home, those kind of factors. But I just want, one of the things you'll find out is I'm very realistic when we talk about like what is tangible today versus more futuristic in the future proofing aspect of it. And it's something that we'll take back, with county staff when we talk about those aspects of tolling, because I just have to highlight the fact that obviously there's so many entities that touch the Tahoe region. And so when you start to talk about the state arterials, that's why we'll have to escalate that to that next level. And tolling is still something that, other than the handful of toll roads that we have throughout California, it's still very much more, I'll say, longer future planning. But knowing what's happening just as a country, it's just something that you've touched on. I don't want to ignore that or just push it to the side. It's just that's a big one for sure, and I'll make sure that we incorporate that. But I do think, from some of the information that you shared, I do think that the permitting information is something that we definitely can tackle and figure out a way to incorporate that, because that's something that when you talk about, we call it spillover parking, where because of the popular destinations and locations, it's how you actually start to wrangle folks to seek alternatives like transit, use their bikes, etc. So I just really wanted to thank you for your feedback, and obviously can hear very much in your circumstances how much this affects you. So I'm going to take a pause there if you're okay, and I'm going to go ahead and move on. We have Scott who put up his hand. No, thank you. Put up his hand in the chat, and I'm just going to figure out here how to get to him. We're navigating the chat box, and here we go. So Scott, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much. I am unmuted, but I, having done dozens of these meetings, couldn't find my raise my hand.
There you go.
You hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Great. So without being too critical of Dixon and Associates, I'd like to start out with the opening monologue and point out probably who paid and is hiring you. You talked about more parking for more people. I think we need to talk about parking for the current demand. Is that stupid? I mean, we don't have, any parking right now. Then I could parlay into the map that you showed on the beginning, and not to nitpick because everything's so secretive, but there's, some fabulous properties that have been under Placer County control for 10 years now, let's say, surrounded by chain link fencing that could have been wonderful parking. But why wasn't any of that happening? Magic wand, because I know you're going to ask that, and I wanted to start with that. I have lived in 96143 for over 40 years. I do not live in the grid, but I have many, many friends and people who are impacted by this overflow parking. And so magic wand, I would say that's where it needs to start. We've built some new parking lots, but we're going to let campers park there with no sewage overflow, which is going to push people further up into the grid, which is no bueno. We just need to slow it down. The part about, and there have been some very well spoken and some very well heeled people who have talked about their investments in the commercial core in Kings Beach. That's fabulous, and there's problems about parking, but as a 30+ year realtor, all I can say is due diligence. I don't know. Look at what you're buying before you spend millions of dollars. And I've got lots of notes here. Oh yeah, Truckee, you've helped with the action plan to leverage the parking. What does that mean? Ms. Dixon, what is leveraging the action plan in Truckee? It's all about making the community, the town center more money. And I'd love to hear more about how you're following the parking plan in Kona, Hawaii, because I also go there. And I don't want to be a nag. That's enough. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. And only because we want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk, if we can leverage the parking magic wand exercise. And if I could just touch on the one point that you asked about Truckee, it's about the implementation of the parking action plan, which basically is really the implementation guidelines for how they can ensure that there's parking access in the town's core, which is really when we start to talk about Kings Beach. It's about being able to provide that access and that turnover to ensure that there is parking available throughout Kings Beach. And so that's something where, knowing that we have the recreational impacts and the commercial impacts, that's one of the reasons why when we talk about the holistic approach towards this and why it's so important. And the one thing that I always like to share with folks is that when we talk about the challenges associated with parking management, I like to describe that there are cookie cutter problems in communities, but not cookie cutter solutions. And that's what makes Kings Beach so exceptional, that whether we're talking about Kona, Maui, Springdale, Utah, you name it, again, some of the challenges that you all face are very thematic, but it's about how we're going to solve for that in Kings Beach, which is part of the conversation. But I do see Kevin Drake, you've had your hand up. So if you wouldn't mind to go ahead and unmute yourself, and I keep doing this backwards, bear with me one second. Kevin, if you could unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear how you would use the parking magic wand.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. About a 20-year resident of Kings Beach. I have a lot of feelings about this, but I'm going to keep it really simple. I see a lot of other fellow residents who will probably speak to the residents' perspective. I'm going to speak from a user perspective. One thing I'd love to see in a future parking system in Kings Beach, and frankly anywhere, is great ease in finding the available parking spots or spot. one of my own peeves is when I'm circling, trying to find it. And I see it in my own neighborhood. I see it all the time. People just have no idea where the parking is. There's a perception that we don't have enough parking. And a lot of the time that's not the case. It's just not easy to find. So I think a really high functioning parking system is easy to find the spot you need when you need it. I'll leave it at that.
I love it, Kevin, and that goes back to our theme of making parking easy, convenient, and accessible. So I'm with you on that, and I appreciate your feedback. So I'm going to move next to Aaron O'Brien. Aaron, it looks like you are already unmuted. So if you want to go ahead and go next.
Hi, thank you for having us here tonight. And I've been a 32-year residential transplant from the East Coast. And my magic wand for parking would be, I'm a general manager of 2 resorts on Highway 28, just outside of Kings Beach and Tahoe Vista. So I can relate to the gal that spoke about the bike lanes. We definitely promote pedestrian traffic in our company and carpooling and whatnot. The bike lanes, they got painted this year. I would like to take the credit for that. I held the candle with Cindy Gustafson. She has several emails from me and your parking people and Caltrans. I've been doing that for 3 years. We had spent $65 million on the core improvement project to solicit pedestrian traffic, but we let those bike lanes go down to the black pavement. Around the corner at one of my resorts at the Red Wolf Lakeside Lodge, that blind turn is deadly. People park in that bike lane all day long, with due respect, because it doesn't say bike lane anymore. I call CHP 4 to 5 times a day, wasting their valuable time and mine as well. And they flat out say, we have 1 CHP officer. To be honest with you, Aaron, it's not a priority. So my little niece and nephew, when we're out there on the bike lane, I almost saw my nephew get hit and killed. And that really jarred me. If we are going to promote all of this, we need to take care of those bike lanes, and we need to have enforcement when people park on them. Secondly, they park on the sidewalks. I'm not a mobile challenged person, but I see people in their wheelchairs in the road in Kings Beach in the back streets. You can't get more than 1 car in the grid in the back streets. I live on Salmon and Brook, and which I call the Kings Beach bypass, because everybody goes down there about 40 to 50 miles an hour because they can't get through town. And it's just really scary out there in the summer. My magic wand would be to have an overnight parking lot for somewhere in Kings Beach, Tahoe Vista. And also poor Safeway, right? I mean, they are the local parking lot for all of Kings Beach and Tahoe Vista. Can't tell you how many times I went to go in the store, but there's nowhere to park, but there sure are thousands of people with their coolers, and poor management there. You know, they're busy running around like the rest of us, just trying to get through the day. They don't have the staff to monitor that. Rite Aid, they closed down. You know, poor Michelle, she was the manager there for years, and you'd say, I tried to park, but there was nowhere to park, but everyone's unloading their vehicles, and they say, you know what, we just can't deal with it. And look at Whitecaps. They finally had to close their private beach because of the parking problem. So 1, there's no overnight parking for anybody at any time of the year, summer or winter. We need to have an overnight parking lot. Now, whether that's going to be private, and it's a multi-tier, which could go underground. You know, somebody could make an arm and a leg off that. I don't have that kind of capital, or the county needs to invest in an overnight parking solution. Right now in the wintertime, you can't park anywhere on the shoulder of the road between November and May. We have several people that check into our resorts that have 2 cars. And we unfortunately can only allow 1 car per unit. I'm not saying that that's your problem. So then they just park wherever they want. They park in Dave's in Kings Beach. They park anywhere they can. And the property owners, including myself, it's really hard to get a car towed out of your lot. It really is. And it's debilitating to businesses where, you know, people are like, you don't have parking, we're not going to come, or they go into the side streets. On my corner, you know, I put rocks and logs outside my house because all day long, it's just when that spot opens, there's kids, there's no disassociation for local people between our personal and professional life. When you have 2 days off and you just want to hide out at your house, you can't. The tourists are there, they're unloading, babies crying, dogs barking, dogs are going potty in my yard. You know, people are totally disrespectful. I don't see that there's enough parking. Maybe I just am frustrated. I don't see it. I don't think it's easy to find. And I've lived here 32 years. If I can't find it, I don't know how someone that's visiting. I also like someone else that said that, you know, there should be permit parking. Banff National Forest up there in Canada, you got to pay to come in, and there's only a certain amount of cars. We don't have the infrastructure to accommodate all of these guests. If you've ever tried to drive through the grid in Kings Beach because you can't get through town, you literally, to get from my house to Red Wolf Lakeside Lodge, which I believe is about 1.25 miles, I mean, we're talking 20 minutes, and I have to go up, all the way up, down Speckled, across 267, down Tiger, back around Brassy to get to work. And the whole way, all you see is droves. I have videos that I take and I've sent to Cindy Gustafson saying, if I was a first responder, how would you get to me? So it's a huge problem. I don't want to just complain about it. I very much appreciate you guys and all you're doing to focus in on that. Somebody finally ripped the Band-Aid off, and we can all appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Erin. There was one thing I wanted, well, you said many things, by the way, but there was one thing I wanted to ask you about, and especially about the snow and the overnight parking. I get it in terms of, you know, there's nowhere to park because obviously with the snow removal, etc. for overnight parking. I wanted to ask about during the spring and summer months. One of the challenges, and I do want to recognize one of our speakers mentioned earlier about overnight camping. And I guess that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. And I think someone mentioned like the dumping, etc. is during the summertime, how do we prevent an overnight parking location from becoming a campground type of location? And I'm just wondering your feedback or thoughts about that.
You'd have to have overnight parking enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, I would think that'd be the only viable option. It has to be monitored. And I know that you guys are going to hire more parking enforcement officers, but I would imagine it'd kind of be the same way they would manage that over at North Star parking lot or Palisades, you know, but, you know, and maybe have local businesses buy into those lots. I know that there was talk of that years ago when I went to a parking management meeting in Tahoe City, that they would, you could buy a parking spot, even though it wouldn't be dedicated to you. You know, I would be willing to have our 2 HOAs invest in something like that, knowing that we couldn't be guaranteed a lot, but we're going to help with the parking enforcement, and this lot would be available to our guest and timeshare owners.
Great. No, thank you for that. I appreciate the follow-up, and I will look forward to hopefully talking to you more in the future. So thank you, Erin, for participating.
Thank you.
We have Danielle. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and unmuting yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming.
So first, you know, I would love to acknowledge Jessica's thought on you know, tolling and basin entry fee. You know, I do think while I really appreciate this effort to focus on the parking management piece, I would like to put it on the record that it, you know, that is the critical path forward to really manage Lake Tahoe in a holistic manner. And it is important that we get there. And so this is a good step in the right direction. I think everybody here that I know I hopped on late, but you know, we're all acknowledging there are just too many cars during certain periods in particular. I think, you know, for me, I just don't see us continue. We're not going to build our way out of this with more and more parking. It's just, it's not possible. And quite frankly, our roadways can't handle that parking or, you know, that number of vehicles. So, you know, this parking management approach really is the solution, especially for such a small community as Kings Beach. that really gets inundated, and that parking, from my opinion and my viewpoint, it is mostly associated with the recreation access. So, you know, while I appreciate Placer County bringing this forward as a discussion, it is important that we get the Conservancy here at the table, that we have California State Parks at the table, and really looking at this holistically. Like Kevin Drake said earlier, people really need to know all their options for parking and how to get there easily. I think some of the things that we see with the peak demands that we have is at our recreation sites is pushing the visitors to other locations. Like Sand Harbor will commonly push, and even the East Shore Trail will push people, when those get full, will push people to Kings Beach. But there is not a clear understanding of if there is parking available. And at those points in time, there is typically not. So, you know, it is really about trying to get the information out to the traveler in a way that they could make an informed decision before they even get to our community. and you know, perhaps there is not a way for them to get there with their vehicle. And that's why it is important to look at the whole system and have the funding available for other modes of transportation to get around our community. You know, I do feel, you know, I am aware of the investments in transit around the basin. I do feel that Placer County is the one most invested in that. And I appreciate that. But if, you know, our visitor base, and especially our day use in Kings Beach, is coming from Washoe County, right? That is coming from the growth that is happening around this basin and not from within this basin. Yes, obviously, vacation rentals are a concern because that has, you know, expanded our hotel areas, you know, but really the day use is significant in Kings Beach, and we've got to find a better way to get people to know not to come here during those peak times. So, you know, I do think this is kind of a critical path forward for our businesses. Like they were mentioning, Whitecaps had to close their lots. They've gotten in fistfights. They're almost threatening with fistfights from people that would refuse to leave their lots. So I agree that it would be valuable to see our businesses have the opportunity to participate, as well as our state partners here, and, you know, try and do this as one whole package. The enforcement piece, that's complex here. We've got CHP, we've got sheriffs, you know, we've got different folks that are doing it, and that to me should be integrated and actually associated with the parking system, and that the offenders are actually paying for that enforcement. So I don't feel that even if we do move to some sort of paid parking, it should not be those that are paying for that use to cover the cost of the enforcement, but the enforcement needs to, you know, tickets need to cover their own cost of that, because those are, I think it's a difference of good behavior and bad behavior. And this really is about changing behavior. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
No, thank you, Danielle. And you might have not seen the earlier part of the presentation, but Rebecca did share the escalating scale for the penalties as well, which I think is obviously many steps ahead of where other programs are as well. So that's a real win for the program. And again, I know that may not be relative to everybody on the call, but when you do talk about being able to influence behavior, those fine amounts being higher is something that's really an important deterrent, that's for sure. So Bryant, I see you have your hand up. Would you mind to unmute yourself? Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
There you go. Go ahead.
I felt like I needed to chime in. I'm one of the owners of Whitecaps Pizza. We're kind of on the front lines of a lot of these issues. I just mostly wanted to reemphasize a lot of what people have already said very well. But I'm a lifelong resident. I've been operating businesses in Kings Beach since 1987. So I've seen a lot of changes. When the state recreation area first came in and buildings were torn down and the state beach was created, and $10 parking, or maybe it was $5 at the time, arrived, the parking pressure got shifted to me. People didn't want to pay, and that's when I saw it. But in those days, the business environment was a lot different than it is now. Things have changed dramatically, especially in the summer months. The pressures are much higher. When I first heard of the day or the basin entry fee idea, I scoffed at that, like, what a crazy idea. 30 years later, it's like, wow, maybe that's what we need.
Right.
There's a serious problem with just too many people. And it's, 30 years ago, when I was doing business in Kings Beach, when people would come to town, you saw a different level of appreciation for Lake Tahoe and the experience they were having. Now it's changed, like it was said earlier, the Washoe County effect, or whatever you want to call it. But these day use people that just show up with their barbecues, their coolers, they're already mad because they had traffic getting there, or whatever. They're on a mission. They're going to have their really quick experience at Tahoe. They're going to, use everything and enjoy for the day, leave their trash and get home. And those of us on the front lines, it's not always pleasant to be dealing with that crowd. As far as magic wands, I need like one for every finger, because there's so many things. The people that irritate me over the top are the pick up and drop off people that use my restaurant. They go in the fire lane, they stop everything, they park in the prime view from the restaurant to the water, and they're not going to spend a dime at my restaurant. All they're doing is creating drama for my place. And it's gotten to such a level, it's at times it feels unbearable. Like I don't even want to go there and be part of it. It's just like it's a lot. But anyway, the signage for the existing lots would be great. One part of me says we need more lots, but maybe maybe we don't need more lots. Maybe we need to control the people that we have here and a little bit better, and smooth out the highs and the lows a little bit more.
It really does come down to some of the stuff that Danielle said too, is when you talk about trip planning, is that if Kings Beach is maxed out right now, let me find another spot to go to. It's something that I know I was sharing this earlier, but on the project that we did in Maui that obviously got postponed because of the fires, but the intention was, I want to share, there's actually some similarities here. When it came for the locals, was they wanted to, it was a big thing about beach access and the reality that they couldn't go to the beach because the tourists were taking over all of the beaches. And so the opportunity to be able to promote where the available parking was, so that when we were maxed out at those popular beach locations, we were going to be able to push that messaging out through the Park Maui app so that folks could actually plan their day and not go and further, impact the density of where it was already overcrowded. And so I do think that there's some concepts there that we could try to leverage. One of the things that is advantageous is there's a Park Tahoe brand that when we talked about being able to try to tie it all in between the state parks and all of the different destination locations, that could be an opportunity here that will definitely pull on that thread. And I do appreciate the pickup drop off impacts that you shared. And we'll definitely look forward to talking to you, Brian, about the shared parking agreements, because I do think that with some of the opportunities coming up, and the opportunity to leverage how potentially the county could help effectively manage your parking locations to ensure that you got your customers parking there, or monetizing parking for that matter, and discussing what those opportunities could look like. Would love the opportunity to be able to talk to you further about that. And I would just ask that anybody that had interest or maybe has a parking lot location that's impacted as a result in our, most peak periods, if you want to go ahead and put your contact information in the chat box and send your email address, we'll be happy to coordinate a follow-up discussion with all of you so that we really could talk about the specifics of what this could look like and how it could potentially work, and talk about how we might be able to leverage some of those opportunities sooner than later. And especially as we come out of this winter season, there could be some demonstration locations that we could leverage to show the effectiveness of how it could potentially work. So I really appreciate your feedback. And again, I'll taking your own words, thanks for being on the front line as it relates to this for sure. So, and appreciate your feedback too. I wanted to take a moment here and see if we had anyone else that wanted to raise their hand and provide their ideas as it relates to the parking magic wand. This has been really, I've got pages of notes already, and I know that my colleagues have been taking down your feedback. But if anyone else wanted to raise their hand, we really do want to hear from everybody. No idea is too big or too small. Obviously, we've already talked about the basin entry fee. And I see that my colleague Jennifer has said, put it in the chat. Any interest that you have in the shared parking agreements, we'd be happy to chat with you all about that. And John, I see your comment in regard to the basin entry fee. We'll definitely take note of that. Is there any, I'm happy to call on folks, but I also, there we go. And I saw a hand. I think I saw got Cindy Gustafson. Are you still there? Did you put your hand up? Supervisor Gustafson. I'm not sorry, my tongue twister there.
Cindy's fine. Don't need titles.
Oh,
Hey,
thank you, Cindy. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank staff and Julie. What a great presentation and great responses. I really looking forward to your recommendations, and your experience in these other locations is going to be tremendous. And Rebecca, you and your team for putting this together. I know the bigger issue is the number of vehicles coming in the basin. And as Danielle said, many of us at Tahoe Transportation District did support the basin entry fee. And I just want to give people the right platform for that. So your local representatives supported that. It was the state, the two states that shut us down. So I want everyone to feel free to, I know the governor's got a lot on his desk right now and not a lot of money to deal with, and we're trying to self-fund solutions for our community. And that's what we presented to them over 2 years ago. So please feel free to write your state representatives and the governors to get them to reconsider a basin entry fee. It is the way forward. It's how we're going to afford the transit lanes coming in and out of the basin, parking structures or parking elements outside the basin. We need your help. And so if any of you feel, a lot of you have written me a lot of emails. If you could also copy the governor's office and our state electeds, I'd really appreciate that help. I need to make it them to hear your voices. And I've been trying, and I know Alexis Hill in Washoe County, I know Brooke and South Lake Tahoe. We're all trying. We know this is a big part of the answer. But in the meantime, what should we do in parking? And Julie, I think your solutions are great, and expertise, a pilot program, and getting it right and trying to transition into something that will work for our basin and provide, the bigger issue is the basin entry fee funding will help us make a lot of things happen in transportation and controls and enforcement. So that's why I'm so passionate about that issue. So thanks everyone who brought it up. And I appreciate tonight. We had a real tragedy today out at Palisades, and I was out there most of the day, and our hearts are with the victim and their family tonight. So stay safe out there. The roads are treacherous tonight. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cindy. We really appreciate it. And I just have to reinforce, that's why there's no idea that's too big or too small when it comes to this. And, you know, again, being realistic, we've got some challenges when it comes to the two state entities, and that's going to be one of the challenges that we obviously have to overcome. But I also want to highlight there's been several policy changes at the state level as well that are just impacting parking management as a whole. And many of you may or may not be aware of the daylighting ordinance that actually went into effect January 1 of this year. This year is an education year, and it goes into effect for enforcement January 1, 2025. And the daylighting ordinance is basically not being authorized to park within 20 feet of an intersection. And that's something that's really important when we talk about pedestrian bike safety factors like that. So again, a lot of folks aren't necessarily familiar with some of those policy changes. Some of the other policy changes as it relates to parking over these last couple of years has to do with the waiving of parking minimums when you're within a half a mile of a transit stop. And these are things that I like to let folks like yourselves know, because the reality is your local entities are basically being handed these policies down from the state level, and it absolutely does have an effect on the day-to-day. And we just like to be sure to keep you all apprised. And I can't reinforce enough what Cindy shared there in terms of making sure that you're communicating to your state representatives. And that is not pawning anyone off at all here. It's just the fact that as concerned residents, which is evident of you all being here today, it's why it's so important that it be escalated to that state level. And the reason why I reinforce that is because when we were sharing, I think it was Aaron who was sharing some of the overnight parking restrictions. The only reason why I asked the follow-up question that I did is because right now, when we talked about the challenges of folks that the unhoused and the people who are living in their cars, that is creating challenges when we talk about overnight parking restrictions. And the reason why I brought up the camping issues, because that does continue to be an issue that continues to impact us throughout California. And it's something that, as we talked about, overnight parking allowances will be something that we'll have to consider and incorporate as we talk about how to modify policy to support some of the needs of the community. So I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to raise their hand today and offer any further ideas about how they would use the parking magic wand. I'm not seeing anyone else put up their hands. You can also put a note in the chat if you wanted to. If you're not sure, you can find the raise your hand option under the reactions button on your Zoom link. I'm just going to take a quick look here in the chat. I'm going to look to Jennifer to see. Jennifer, are there any questions that have come up in the chat before we hand the mic back to Rebecca? Anything else that we should be addressing?
I think in terms of what was recently discussed, I see here Sydney's just saying that she will share the information of who to contact regarding the basin area entry fee. But I don't see any other direct questions. For those of you who have submitted a comment with your feedback, if you're interested in sharing that comment on the call or expanding on it, we're happy to take your raised hands at this time.
Oh, I see Nick Harris. Nick, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, thank you for this presentation tonight. I think my magic wand would be related to the fact that parking demand really fluctuates, right? If you go day by day, let's say midweek, you know, might not be that bad. It's pretty easy. But then we're talking about weekends. We're talking about July 3rd, those crazy times. And so I look at that and I say, okay, if it's not busy and we're talking about potentially paid parking, let's make it cheap if there's not many people trying to park. But if we're talking about right next to the beach, peak days, you know, we want to keep those spots turning over. It seems like, you know, the out-of-town visitors, maybe we could have a demand element, right? if everyone is desperate to get that super close in parking spot right next to the state beach, I think people would be willing to pay a bit more for that on those peak days. And then the magic wand there I would love to see is, okay, that revenue that gets generated, let's see that go back into the community. I don't want this just going off to, Auburn, Placer County headquarters. I want this money going back into the local community. So that's my magic wand, is demand-based, and then that money, those revenues, right back into the local community.
No, Nick, thank you for that. And there's two things that you've highlighted that I'll bring up for everybody's benefit. What you're describing is exactly what you called it, a demand-based solution that can have basically different rates during peak times, including weekdays versus weekends. You can also have different time of day pricing if we get to a paid parking solution. But I also would love to highlight is a parking benefits district. This is something that has been very successful in other communities, so that what you end up doing is defining the parameters of where parking management solution lies, and the monies generated after the operating costs basically are reinvested into infrastructure solutions, and also benefits within that community. And it's on programs that have worked very successfully. Anybody who's familiar with Old Pasadena, they actually were the very first parking benefits district in the United States. And this is something that communities across the country have leveraged. And it's something also that when you talk about shared parking agreements too, the opportunity to take the monies after, again, the compensation levels or whatever's negotiated with the private property owners, again, that reinvestment into the benefits district is something that also provides the signage, or the planters, or whatever the case may be, the resting benches. There's a lot of opportunities with that, and it's something that we've already begun to outline in terms of potential solutioning. So I really appreciate your feedback on that, because you're right on track in terms of some of the potential of what could be done. That's the one benefit of the technology that exists today, is the fact that you can have flexibility in the solutioning. And I would also like to highlight the importance of transparency. When it does come to parking management, you want everyone to know what you're doing so that they can follow the rules. And so that's really key when we talk about what we come up with that's easy, convenient, and accessible, is that you want to make it really manageable for everyone. So Nick, thank you so much for your feedback. You're right on track, so we appreciate that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Julie.
Did anyone else have their, and I see Johanna Butler. Johanna, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for this presentation. It's been really helpful hearing different perspectives. I live in Carnelian Bay. I don't live in Kings Beach, but I do go to Kings Beach quite a bit. I do agree with the entry pass into the Tahoe Basin to minimize the amount of cars coming in, because that's the biggest issue I feel, and just people being respectful of cleaning up after themselves. But my one question is talking more about doing a parking structure, building one. Can you explain more about that, just as a possible solution to help with more parking?
So I think this kind of goes back to what one of the community members shared, in the respect of right now adding a parking structure would not be on the current priority list. The reason why you want to do is you want to leverage your existing parking assets, both public and private. One of the things I like to share is that when we talk about building parking structures, the expense associated with that, and even using Nick's comments from before, is this a facility that is needed year round or not? And right now, when we talk about the expense associated with building a parking garage, right now the industry standard is about $63,000 per parking space. And that doesn't include, and it doesn't include the cost of land. And so the reason why I'm not saying that it's ruled out as an initiative, I don't want to say it's not possible. But one of the things I will say through a parking action plan is you try to vet through all of the opportunities first and see what we basically can identify. And when you talk about the more longer range opportunities, and identifying the location of where you might put one as well, and just using some of the examples of what some of the community members have shared, when we talk about your views and your vistas and factors like that too, those are always all factors when you want to think about it. And then kind of going back to what some of the community members have shared as well, is that by building parking as well, are we looking to invite more people or more cars also to Kings Beach? So I think that those are all things that we need to weigh out. And throughout this effort, I'm not ruling it out, Johanna, but what I would suggest is we look at maximizing the existing assets before building additional ones. And I think that that's something that this effort over this next several months will start to dive into. But I always like to let folks know that building a garage, while could be a solution for many communities, it's also a very expensive endeavor. And then also the opportunity to even go subterranean. There's a lot of factors that tie into that as well. And that actually increases the cost substantially when you start to build a parking infrastructure. So I hear you, and I'm not saying it's not potential or not a possibility, but I would just say that looking at the existing assets is where we wanted to start, and then see where that takes us. And then basically being able to vet through and see what comes out of that to see if that's a viability or if there's a location that can be vetted. There's just, I think, a few steps that we have to take before we get to that consideration for sure.
No, I appreciate bringing that up. And then just one last thing, just adding the flexing in the prices depending on demand. Because when it's not as needed, it'd be nice for locals to be able to go to the local restaurants and not have to pay a significant amount of money to go park there, to utilize the restaurants and other shops there.
Absolutely. And I will share with you all that I mentioned a few of the communities that we've worked in, especially what I will call tourist popular locations. And we've been very successful at being able to implement different locals benefits that have worked really effectively in those communities as well. And so I think that that's one thing that I just always like to reinforce. And going back to what we said at the beginning, this is definitely a quality of life issue. And it's why I'm so grateful that we do have some of the representation that we have on today's meeting so that everyone can hear, some of the challenges and impacts that you're all facing based on the demand and based on how popular Kings Beach is. But I can assure you of the fact that being able to vet through potential opportunities with locals benefits, it's something that has been a big win for us on other projects. What those are today, we got to come up with some recommendations first, but we'll definitely tie that in so we can figure out what those benefits maybe could look like. So thank you so much, Johanna. We appreciate you coming out today. And Jennifer, I see there's been quite a few more comments. Oh, but I see Amy Wood has raised their hand or her hand or their hand. So Amy, would you mind to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, thanks for having this conversation. I was just thinking that, some of the ski resorts have been trying to utilize like a park and ride program. And specifically maybe for these issues with the beaches, if you could park in Truckee, some of these people are coming from Truckee or coming off the interstate, park in Truckee, you can hop on a bus, you can put your cooler maybe on the bus if it's like those charter buses that have storage, and then you get dropped off right there at the beach and you have a schedule and then you can get taken back. I know years ago I visited Denali National Park and they don't allow cars past a certain point and it's only buses. So we took the bus with our hiking backpacks and, then we just knew when we're done hiking, we got to go catch the bus. So maybe something like that would be a consideration. I know we have buses that North Star has and Palisades has, and they probably don't get used a ton in the summer. So maybe talking to them or doing something like that could help.
I love it, Amy. And in fact, what you are suggesting is such a simple concept and simple idea, but to be able to leverage those partnerships is definitely something we would love to take advantage of. So we'll make note of that. And I guess I would ask from your local expertise, which of the resorts do you think would be most conducive in terms of locality from a park and ride perspective? Just like if we were to start somewhere, what would be the one that you would suggest would be the most easily convenient or best location? Oh, Amy, you might have remuted yourself. Let me see. Can you unmute yourself again?
Yeah, thanks.
Mhm,
Well,
sure.
just for Kings Beach specifically, I would think North Star. You know,
Great.
it's right there, and I think that North Star is doing something with the airport this year, in Truckee for their parking, and they've partnered with them somehow. I don't know all the details on that, but North Star would be my
Great.
idea. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much. That was a really great idea. We'll definitely take note of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And Jennifer, just while we're waiting to see if anybody else has raised their hand, was there anything else in the chat that we should mention or any questions that have come up?
I'm just going through the chat right now. I just wanted to highlight, there is one question that for transparency would be good to put out. And Nichols did ask, does Dixon have any part in the actual installation of parking kiosks or the resulting income? I did share a quick answer in the chat, but Julie, maybe you want to expand that for transparency.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. The reality is we are technology agnostic, and our job is to help develop recommendations to optimize your parking management solution. And we don't have a vested interest in the revenues or in the vendors that are selected. And the reality is our opportunity here is to try to find a solution that's going to be the best match for Kings Beach. It might result in a request for proposal or an RFP solicitation to go out there and solicit different technology providers. It might result in some demonstration pilots, but by no means any result of any revenue that Dixon benefits from other than the contract that we have with the county to provide this action plan and to help develop the solutions. So thank you for that inquiry. And Jennifer, were there any other comments in the chat?
I think there's a couple of folks who have tried to respond to Leia's question about if anyone's contacted the state parks to be an active participant and part of the solution, mentioning that Friday nights for music are crazy busy, and everyone says, like everyone says, cars parked everywhere. Could the state parks enact a reservation system?
So that's something too, is we are engaging as state parks. I wanted to let everybody know that, and we will continue to pursue that. I did want to let everyone know, we actually did do a project in Springdale, Utah. And the one thing I do know from that direct experience, which is the, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on my name of the park there?
Zion National Park.
Thank you, Zion. Sorry, it's been a long day, everybody. Zion, I learned in working with the state park there, the wait list requirements for the state parks to get into the reservation system. So I just wanted to let everybody know that there is a process on their side as well, but we'll definitely pursue that conversation with the parties involved. So, and that's something that I think is super important for everybody to understand. Just like I said at the beginning, there's no one magic bullet that's going to solve for the needs of the community and the parking implications. And that's where it's a holistic approach, why all of your feedback is so important. And you can see all of the different entities that we need to speak to because it's going to be everyone being a participant in this process. And that's why we appreciate all of you all so much. So I know we just got about 10 minutes left. Before I hand the mic back to Rebecca, I just really wanted to thank everyone again tonight for coming out and sharing your feedback. I wanted to reinforce that tomorrow at noon, we're having another workshop, same content, maybe different feedback or different ideas. You're welcome to attend that. And then please watch the newsletters and announcements because we will be coming back in March. But in the meantime, please don't hesitate to share your email address in the chat. We're happy to follow up, especially for those that have potential shared parking agreement locations. And I just, again, really want to thank you all for your feedback tonight. This has been really appreciated, and knowing that you're taking time out of your personal schedules to talk about parking demonstrates that this is something that obviously impacts your daily lives. So with that, Rebecca, I'm going to hand the microphone back over to you. So thank you so much again, everybody. Do I need to, let me see if I can unmute you. We definitely put a lockdown on this, didn't we? Hold on one second. There you go, Rebecca. Did that work?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Julie, for facilitating that very constructive conversation, great feedback. Back to kind of the beginning of your statement about how everyone is an expert because they drive cars and they park them. And we heard a lot of really great, I'd say, expert opinions on the local issues. I wanted to quickly address, there was a comment from Leah Kaufman, will the county encourage partnering with North Star and Palisades, kind of a summer park and ride? We actually had a conversation with Palisades earlier, the summertime, and we are working with them and North Star on backing up enforcement of their winter parking reservation program. So we do have relationships with the ski resorts, and we will continue to work with them, even expand into the summer opportunities. So I wanted to just address that. So again, thank you so much for your participation. Thank you, Cindy, for being on the call and for putting those contacts in the chat. She did put the governor, senator contact information. We'll share that in our presentation at tomorrow's meeting, the virtual meeting at noon. And we're looking forward to more conversations about parking. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.